Good morning, students. This is second video lecture on the subject object-oriented programming with C++. So in this session, we are going to discuss about an important programming technique or methodology called structured programming. But before continuing with, we will discuss or we will revise what we have studied in our previous session. The previous session, I gave a brief introduction to what is program and what is programming language. A program is nothing but set of clear instruction which is given to a computer to solve a problem. And the language that we use to write the instruction in the program, we call it as a programming language. We discussed about different levels of programming languages like machine level language, assembly level language, and high level language. In a machine level language, the entire program is written using binary codes 0 and 1, nothing else. In an assembly level language, the program is written using mnemonic codes like add, sub, mult, etc. instead of binary codes. In a high level language, the program is written neither using binary code nor using mnemonic code, but by using English-like statements and mathematical operators. We also discussed about the merits and demerits of each of these levels of programming. In a machine level language, the advantage is the program executes fast because it's already in zeros and one, no need for any translation. The drawback is it's a tedious task to remember the binary code for every line in the program. In assembly level language, the advantage is it's easier to write the program in assembly level language because the mnemonics are easy to remember and compared to binary codes. But the problem is a computer cannot understand assembly level language. Hence, the program should be converted into machine level language using a translator called assembler. In a high level language, the advantage is it's very easy to write the program in high level language because you need not remember binary codes nor mnemonic code. But the problem is the computer cannot understand. Hence, the program must be converted back to machine level language using a translator called compiler. In some case, you can use interpreter also. And I gave a brief introduction to a procedure-oriented programming. In a procedure-oriented programming, the concept is the program is written as a sequence of instruction. Every instruction in the program tells the computer or instructs the computer to do something. It could be like taking the input from the user, processing the input, and display the result, etc. And some of the characteristics of a procedure-oriented programming are the whole program is considered as one single unit. Because of this single unit nature, a procedure-oriented programming suffers from three major drawbacks. One thing is all the data that are used in a program are global in nature. Because if the program is decomposed into sub-program, then we can have some data which is specific for a function or some data which can be shared by all the functions. But here what happens is the entire program is considered as one single unit, means all the data belongs to that unit, means that data becomes global. The main problem with the global data is there is no security for your data. Global data can be altered at any time in the program. Once the value of the global data gets altered, means you cannot get back its original value. So your data is not so secure. And control was transferred from one point in the program to another point in the program using a dangerous statement called goto statement. A good programming technique is one where, as far as possible, you should not use goto statement. Even if there is a need for goto statement, you have to use it so rarely. But in a procedure-oriented programming, there are no other alternative means we have to inevitably use the goto statements. And writing, understanding, or maintaining small program through procedure-oriented concept is okay. But as the program size increases, you can't write it using procedure-oriented programming because it's becomes very difficult to handle it as a single unit. So hence, writing is also difficult, understanding is much difficult, and maintenance becomes very tedious task. So the main objectives of this session is to introduce a very popular programming concept called structured programming. In this session, I will highlight the salient features of structured programming. What are the advantages of structured programming? What are the drawbacks of structured programming? Where structured programming will be useful and where structured programming also fails. So all these things we are going to discuss in this session. At the end of this session, you should be in a position to understand what do you mean by structured programming, what are the characteristics or features of structured programming. You should also understand what are the drawbacks of structured programming, and you should be in a position to decide when structured programming is suitable and when structured programming fails. In a structured programming, the entire program is divided into smaller units, and each unit is called as a function. So in a structured programming, a program is nothing but collection of many functions. Whereas in a procedure-oriented programming, a program is nothing but just a sequence of instructions. A program can have any number of functions. Every function has a well-defined purpose. And every function can have an interface with other functions in the same program. Every function takes some input, process that input, and gives out some output. So every function has its own input output. In addition, every function can communicate with other functions also. In the case of structured programming, since the program is decomposed into function, every function can have its own data. The data which are specific to a particular function, we call it as local data. But sometimes what happens is some data need to be shared by more than one function. In that case, you declare such data which is required by more than one function outside of all the functions. So such data which can be shared by multiple functions, we call it as global data. Hence, in a structured programming, we have the concept of both local data as well as global data. Whereas in the case of procedure-oriented programming, we have the concept of only global data. So in that sense, a structured programming is better than a procedure-oriented programming. Function transforms the data from one form to another form. For example, if you write a function to compute the factorial of a given number, we know that factorial takes one number as an input and the output will be the factorial of that number. If you give 4 as an input, so the function accepts 4 as an input, process the 4 and gives you the output as 24 because the factorial of 4 is 24. That means a function transforms the data from one form to another form. Another example is if you write a function to increment a number. For that function, if you give the input as 10, it adds 1 to that number and gives the output as 11. In a procedure-oriented programming, we have to depend only on global data. But when we come to structured programming, some data, if you feel it's very, very important, and that data is specific to a particular function, means you declare that data inside that function. In that case, it becomes a local data. So that means all the data need not be global in nature. There is a less need for global data. A procedure-oriented programming is suitable for writing small program, but using structured programming concept, you can write a program of sufficiently large or sufficient complex program. Because if the program is small, you write it as one function. The program size is become, then you can decompose into two functions. The program size still increases, then you can keep on dividing the function into any number of functions. So the complexity can be managed by the programmer through the process of decomposition. In a structured programming, the control was transferred from one place to another position using what is known as control structure. Whereas in a procedure-oriented programming, the control movement was done only through goto statement. Therefore, a structured programming is also called as goto-less programming. As I told earlier, it's advisable not to use or rarely use the goto statement. So since control structures are available in a structured programming, you need not depend on goto statement. The next characteristics of a structured programming, it follows the property of single entry and single exit. Every function has one entry point and every function has one exit point. Every looping statement has one beginning and one exit. Every conditional statement has one beginning and one end. So if you have two entry point, means naturally you have two exit point. Whereas in the case of procedure-oriented programming, what happens here? You will take an entry into the program. By the use of goto statement, the control automatically, without checking any condition, unconditionally it comes out of that function. So you cannot preserve single entry, single exit format in a procedure-oriented programming. But Structured programming is not an ultimate solution. As the program size is of sufficiently large size, you can manage it with a concept of structured programming. But as the program size becomes too large, even structured programming also fail to produce error-free, and using structured programming concept also is difficult to maintain large program. Now we can see the relationship between data and function. In this diagram I have given, taken three functions: function 1, function 2, function 3, function 4. Function 1 has its own local data, function 2 has its own local data, like that function 3, 4 have their own local data. But the global data, now it is shared by multiple functions also. So global data is shared by multiple functions, means only those data for which you want to give the freedom for multiple functions to access it. Such data only you make it as global. The some data which is very specific, that other function you don't want to give the permission, means you make that data as local. So depending on your situation, depending on your application, you decide what data should be made global and what data should be made local. So in a structured programming, we have both the concept. You have local data as well as global data. But in the case of procedure-oriented programming, the only alternative, you have every data should be declared as global in nature only. But compared to procedure-oriented programming, structured programming can be used for writing complex program. But as the program complexity increases beyond certain limit, structured programming is also failed to produce error-free output. The reason is there are so many drawbacks in a procedure-oriented programming. In a structured programming does not model the real-world problem efficiently. Means there is no one-to-one mapping between real-world entity and equivalent function. For every real-world entity, you cannot write one equivalent function. So it does not model the real problem efficiently. Since in a procedure languages or in a structured programming, many functions can access the same data. Once you try to alter the data, it cannot be possible unless you modify all the functions which access the data. So the arrangement or the structure of a data cannot be altered as per the programmer requirement without altering the function which depends on the data. The reason is, if you alter the data and many functions on this depends on the data, means then all the function fails. So data arrangement cannot be altered without altering the function which access the data. And similarly, whenever you want to add a new data, we need to modify all the functions that access the data, so that data, the function can still access these new items. And procedure-oriented programming or a structured programming are not easily extensible. That means today I have one function. Tomorrow I want to add 2 more functions, 3 more functions. So if I want to keep on increasing the function size on my main, that's not possible. So easily extensibility is not available in the case of procedure-oriented programming as well as structured programming. So the recap, students, in this session we learned about what is structured programming. The basic concept of a structured programming is decomposition. So if the program is small, divide into smaller function. If each function is big, or if the program is big, you decompose the program into function. If each of these function is further big, then again dividing. So keep on dividing, etc. Finally, you reach a stage where the size becomes so small, so that one easily you can write a function. So it follows the approach of divide and conquer strategy. In this session, we learned the different characteristics of a structured programming. Almost all the drawbacks of procedure-oriented programming, conventional procedure-oriented programming, are eliminated in structured programming, because there every data is global. Here we have both local data and global data. There the control was transferred from one point in the program to another point in the program using goto statement. Here the control transfer is done through control structure. Control structure could be either if statement, if else statement, if then else statement, if else ladder, or while loop, for loop, etc. And a structured programming has its own advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are data is more secure compared to procedure oriented, because secure, very important data you can declare as a local, and there is no need to use goto statement. And third one is writing, understanding, and maintaining even large program is also possible in the case of structured programming. But if the size increases beyond that limit, then structured programming fails. Otherwise, when compared to procedure, conventional high-level language, conventional procedure-oriented approach, structured programming is much, much better. So, based on the session we have attended, we can make an attempt on some of the possible multiple choice questions. Data specific to a function is called local data, neutral data, global data, public data. The correct answer is A, because the data which are specific to a function is local. The data which can be accessed by multiple functions is global. Main drawbacks of structured programming are non-availability of local data. That is wrong, because structured programming has both local data and global data. No sharing of data, no, definitely. Function can share the data. Such data we call it a global data. Does not model real world. That is a correct example, because structured programming is not suitable for real world problems. And none of this. The correct answer is C. Identify the wrong statement about structured programming. Function can have both local data and global data. That's a correct statement. Easily upgradable, not correct. Not suitable for real world problem. That's also true. Function can communicate through argument. That's also true. The correct answer is B. Data which can be shared by multiple functions are called local data, neutral data, global data, and the public data. The correct answer is global data. Structured programming is based on dash construct. So in the session we have heard that structured programming is based on the concept of single entry, single exit. For every one entry point, there must be one equivalent exit point. It could be either for a function, or it could be for a program, or it could be for a control structure. So the correct answer is single entry, single exit. So these are some of the review questions that could come in your examination. What is structured programming? So whenever you're answering such question, you just give the definition of structured programming. Explain the characteristics of structured programming. The basic characteristics are decomposing the program into functions. Function can communicate with each other through argument passing. Every function can have its own data called local data. Function can share the data called global data. Function transforms the data from one form to another form. Discuss the merits and demerits of structured programming. The merits are complexity can be easily managed, no need for go-to statement, and writing, understanding program is much easier when compared to general conventional programming. Explain the relationship among data and functions in a programming. So in that case, you can give the structure of how local data is specific to a particular function and how the global data can be shared by multiple functions. So if you have any feedback or any queries on today's session, you can send me the mail or you can WhatsApp me your queries through that mobile number. Hope you have enjoyed the session. I will meet you in the next session. There we will discuss about the remaining concepts.